you can find it. Maybe it's a candle. If it was, let's say, a lighter with the initials JTR on it, well, then you know it was started by John Thomas Rourke. That's just an inside joke. Anyway, there are lighters with people that have evidence on it, that have people's names on it, and you can actually get clues from that. So we want to know that, and that's going to be at the place where the fire started. So we want to look around there. We want to know where it started, therefore we can find out some of these ignition devices, find some other clues and other pieces of evidence. Was there more than one origin area? This is a sign of arson. As we know that it might not be, but it is often a sign of arson because the person wanted to get the whole thing burned. So they went to different rooms, burning each one to make sure that everything would burn faster. So if there are several origin areas, well, that's a sign that it's arson. Does it prove arson? Well, not really, but again, it's something to take into account. Here's another thing, streamers. These are like a trail of burning leading from one area to another. I mean, the idea is, let's say there's in one room you have, let's say, a lot of smoke and air, you know, there's fire there. Then you see like a little trail leading to another room, and then there's another fire over here that's all burned out. It's likely enough that the arsonist, as they were going from one room with their gasoline and making this thing burn, they were pouring the gasoline along the floor as they got to the other room where they started burning there. So these are the streamers, like areas of fire, concentrated of fire or ash or whatever on the, let's say on the floor, where it seems like there was something poured. So that's a sign that there was an arsonist going from one room to another with a gasoline can. To find the origin of the fire, it takes a professional to know exactly all these things, but there are some ideas that even a simple person someone without specific training can use. The V shape, here's like the V shape. If there's a V shape, the bottom of the V is usually where the fire was. In this case, the fire might have started inside the house, but as it got to the outside, the fire started right in this window and it spread over there. Here too, there was a source of fire over here, and there we see the smoke and soot and all that stuff spreading outwards in a V shape. This is indicative that the lowest place is where the fire started. Also, if we can find an accelerant, well, that's probably where the fire started, because that's what arsonists do. They pour the accelerant on the floor and they light the accelerant. So that's where the fire started. So these are ways of finding where the origin of the fire, and hopefully we can find other bits of evidence and clues to find out the perpetrator of the crime. There are complications. Remember about the radiation and things burst in flame across the room? It's called flashover. And this makes it look like there are two fire sources when really there aren't. It's the same thing when you have like that pipe that I mentioned, things burn on one side and suddenly you see something burning on the other side because the pipe conducted. If there are two fires in two different places, people think that this is arson. Someone made a fire over here and then they made a fire over here. But maybe it was a natural thing. It really was not arson. It was just like a space heater problem over here. And there was a metal piece that connected this to another part of another room or another part of the room. And it might look like there are two fire sources. Like, say, here's like the V over here. There's a V over here. Looks like there are two fire sources, but in reality, it's just the pipe connecting them that caused this to burst into flame after this, but not a person making the fire in two different places. So it looks like arson, but it really isn't. There's a lot of false arson evidence that comes from this. And as mentioned, the flashover, it can happen even without a pipe, just the radiation. Also convection. If the wind blows the fire to another part, it looks like there are two sources of fire, as if an arsonist started in two different places. But in reality, it was one source of fire, and it might not have even been arson at all. We mentioned conduction through metal. Another thing is when there's a fire, the flaming ceiling panels or even wooden beams, they fall down onto the floor. Where it falls down on the floor, it'll ignite the floor over there. So again, it looks like another origin, another fire origin, another source of the fire. Well, is that an arsonist doing it? But no, it might not be. Maybe there was a flaming ceiling panel that fell over there and started the fire in that other place. So there are no hard and fast rules. We have to be very careful. We have to look for signs of, let's say, falling ceiling panels. We have to look for metals, where metal might have connected things. We have to examine where the wind was blowing. We have to analyze if there was a fire in a certain place. Where would that fire cause the flames to spread to? We have to analyze all these. A professional has to get to think about all these different things till eventually they'll be able to come up with some answer. Hopefully a good one as to whether it was arson or not and how the fire was started and how it was spread. So how do we know whether there's an accident or arson? What are the signs? Now, we mentioned the sign that if you have two different sources, two beginnings of the fire, but again, it's not so clear. One obvious place is where you see witnesses. If you see witnesses claim they saw a guy running out of a burning house with a lighter in his hand and smelling like gasoline, okay, that was probably arson, but that's not forensics, that's trusting witnesses. If you find ignition devices near the source of the fire, find matches if possible, and candles, that might do it, because if it was again, it might have been an accident. A person might have had accidentally thrown a match on the floor or burned a candle and burned all the way down. But again, it's a sign that it was not spontaneous, for example. If you find the remains of a complicated timer, that like a fuse that might have only ignited and burst into flame after, let's say, 10 minutes, if you find something like that, well, that also implies arson, because nobody does that in their own home. That was definitely pretty much a crime. If you find some kind of a timer or a complicated device that looks like it was designed to cause the thing to burst into flame at a specific time. So again, that doesn't happen naturally. That implies arson. You can also find signs of burglary, of breaking and entering, because again, a person doesn't really start a fire in his own home. If you find signs of breaking and entering, that's a sign someone broke in. Someone else tried to start the fire. It's not perfect, because maybe the person broke in and did the crime of breaking and entering to steal and then just left and didn't cause the fire. But again, if there's a sign of forced entry, there's some likelihood that their forced entry was in order to start the fire. There's also signs of theft or another crime. Again, when so strange things like that are happening, why did someone come into the house when he shouldn't have? Why did someone commit a crime in that house? Maybe they were also trying to do the crime of arson, or maybe they stole and they said, "Hey, let's get rid of the evidence. Let's burn it. We'll remove it all." So maybe that's, again, if there's a theft or another crime, we suspect the arson was done in order to cover up that other crime. So if we know there was a theft, then again we start suspecting arson. And also we find accelerants, because people don't do that themselves. I mean, presumably. So if we find accelerants at the fire scene, probably someone put it there in order to start the fire. An accelerant, as you know, is a material used to start, spread, or keep the fire going. It can even be a bunch of papers, by the way, a bunch of newspapers that can also be used to start and get the fire to get going. But usually it's like something like gasoline, kerosene, lighter fluid, or things like that. Most cases of arson use accelerants. They don't just throw a match on the floor or throw a match on a bed. Again, there are cases of arson where they don't use accelerants, but usually they do. So how do we know if accelerants were used? I mean, that's actually a good sign that it was arson. So one of them is they see like strange shapes of burning on the floor. Open floors are not that flammable, but you see like a lot of burning occurring like in a puddle shape. That's a sign that someone put a puddle of gasoline